60% of people in BC believe the BC Supreme Court decision around Aboriginal title rights in Richmond may, quote, damage reconciliation. And the question was, does it hurt the relationship? Does it create conflict between private property owners and Indigenous communities? Does that statement reflect your view? Or some people support the court ruling because they say it furthers reconciliation by recognizing Indigenous land claims that predate the existence of Canada. So that was the question posed in the polling. I'm joined now by Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, head of the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs. Good afternoon to you, Grand Chief.
Good afternoon.
What do you think of the results in this poll, and what impact this issue in itself might have on reconciliation?
Well, quite frankly, given the long, complicated, complex, torturous journey we've been on since 1763 and the Royal Proclamation, the Cowichan decision represents another day at the office.
And what do you think of what the reaction has been to the Cowichan decision?
Typical for British Columbia.
How so? Can you tell me more about that?
British Columbia, in many ways, has always been considered the spoiled child of Confederation. When Confederation happened, British Columbia was the holdout, and one of the sticking points was Article 13 of the Terms of Union, and BC, the colony, demanded the absolute right to continue discriminating against the Indigenous people as they had done so in the past. And BC has never lent itself in a serious way towards reconciling what the Cowichan decision has brought into the brilliant sunlight of reality. That being that Aboriginal title has always been a reality in British Columbia. The Calder case went forward in 1973, and the issue was, had Aboriginal title been extinguished at the point of Confederation? The Supreme Court found that no, Aboriginal title continues to exist. That's the starting point here.
And I'll just ask you, some of the questions or the concerns that we heard this week from people in Richmond. Some of them said that they were worried that in future people would only be able to buy leasehold property. They were worried about their ability to build on land or sell the property. And so when it comes to that confusion and that uncertainty, what do you think needs to happen there?
Well, clearly the goal is reconciliation, genuine reconciliation. And we've been in the courts for far too long. It's cost billions of dollars with no real outcome on this issue. When you consider the Delgamuukw decision, that continued on the trajectory of attempting to convince governments and the general population to accept the fact of Aboriginal title, the reality of Aboriginal title, and to commit themselves to reconciliation. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Gordon Campbell, when he was premier, had a referendum on the matter. And in spite of the rhetoric, the divisive, inflammatory rhetoric, the majority of British Columbians realize that we need to reconcile Aboriginal and Crown title. And it continues to evade the hesitancy of certain political parties like the BC Conservatives, who are shamelessly exploiting this issue to try and shore up greater support for their party by spreading inflammatory rhetoric, fear-mongering, which is incredibly counterproductive and very damaging to our relationships.
The BC government, the NDP government, has launched an appeal. It's asked for a stay of implementation as it goes to the BC Court of Appeal. What do you want to see when it comes to that reconciliation? What do you want to see from the BC government on this then?
Well, I'd just like to point out that the Cowichan decision is the longest court decision in the history of this country, as was the Calder decision, the Chilcotin decision, Delgamuuk, and so on and so forth. We haven't reached that conclusive point yet, but we need to be supportive. We need to be objective. We need to, grow up, mature. And
what does that require of the province?
It requires the province is battling a very extremist government that seeks to repeal the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. We have a very aggressive BC Conservative Party that's, trying to undermine all of the progress we've made since 1763. Not helpful. The rhetoric's not helpful, and we need to get back on track here.
What would getting back on track look like? Would it be, come to the table, come and negotiate, as what the decision is calling for?
All of the court decisions called for that, from Calder all the way down the track. They always ended off with the parties need to get together and negotiate in good faith. Mm-hmm. And that's what's necessary. That has not happened. Politics has undermined that, those well-intentioned efforts. So here in British Columbia, we have serious issues here with political extremism, white supremacist notions, racism, political violence. And that's what's undermining these efforts. And that's why the general public is so susceptible to this rhetoric that the sky is falling in. The sun continues to rise in British Columbia.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, your sense is that the property owners in Richmond are succumbing to that inflammatory rhetoric?
Yes, absolutely. Which is understandable on one hand, but unfortunate on the other. And again, I'd like to point out there are groups and parties that are exploiting this issue. It's unsavory tactic that when you're in trouble in your political work, that quite often governments raise a distraction. But we need to get back to reconciling Aboriginal Crown title, good intentions. We need to understand the economy and the health and well-being of our families, our children and grandchildren rely on our commitment to get this work done and lay off this divisive, counterproductive, hate-filled rhetoric. It's got to stop.
Let me just take a call here. Grand Chief Stewart Phillip is with me of the BC Union of Indian Chiefs, and David is joining us from New Westminster. Our question, David, is this issue, is the decision or the fallout affecting reconciliation? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's not the decision. It is, as Grand Chief Phillip just eloquently explained, this is a product of our colonial history. 1763, the rights of Indigenous people existed as recognized by the Crown. The court has reaffirmed that time after time after time after time, has urged the parties, that being the governments and the nations, to negotiate. Most of the nations have been willing to negotiate. There have been some treaties, modern treaties. The fallout from the decision, the disinformation, first coming from the city of Richmond to cause people to be concerned for their land where very little concern should exist, the private property held land. Crown land, absolutely. That's what all of this is about. And then, as Grand Chief Phillip has been saying, we've got political parties in British Columbia, provincially, federally, locally, that are stoking up these fears. And we have to remember, it's not just about reconciliation, it's about truth. And too many British Columbians do not understand the truth of what happened in our colonial periods, of how the land was taken away, about how court decisions in modern times have been ignored time and time again, because of the type of political interference that Grand Chief has been talking about. The best thing, the moral thing, the right thing, the smart thing for governments to do these days is to sit down and negotiate real treaties with folks. And in order to do that, in order to get that public support, we have to go back to the truth part of this.
Okay. David?
And British Columbians, sorry, Michelle, I just want to close on one point.
I'm just going to pause as we go to an ad break for our TV audience. But go ahead, David. Finish your thought.
Sorry, the bright spot here is that my kids are just coming out of school and they know way more about all of these issues than I ever was taught in school, and it's clearly than most British Columbians have when this disinformation is out there. The kids know what's coming and what needs to be done, so that gives me hope.
David, thank you very much for your call. That's David in New Westminster. And my guest is Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, head of the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs. So in concrete terms, we've talked about, as you mentioned, you're calling for negotiate, as the court ruling has called for, and previous ones after that as well. What are the concrete steps you'd like to see from the BC government, the BC NDP government?
Well, first of all, we have to put this fire out. And, that takes a conscious commitment to all British Columbians to look in the mirror and realize their inflammatory statements and behavior is very, very harmful to moving forward. We need to commit to serious negotiations that does, in fact, recognize the reality, the legal reality, the constitutional reality of Aboriginal title in British Columbia. The Richmond residents have been living on Aboriginal lands ever since they first purchased those properties, as did the previous owners. That's the reality that British Columbians refuse to accept, but it's the reality we need to work with. And I've been doing this work for 50 years now, and I still believe in reconciliation. I have 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and it's their interests that I'm concerned about moving forward in a place where I can bring my grandchildren up without the political and racial extremism that has become far too prominent in the province of British Columbia. It's shameful.
Grand Chief Phillip, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, head of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. He joined us from Vancouver.